killer is dead.
Hello there, Seraph17 once again. This is My Killer is Dead, very hard difficulty video walkthrough. This is episode 7, The Tiger That Faded into Darkness. Anybody who watched E3 and checked this game out then, you will recognise these sequences because they were displayed a little bit in that early promotional stuff. So, this is a really, really tough chapter. And it's tough because of bad checkpoints. There's no other explanation. But the cool thing is, and the one redeeming factor, is that the music on this game is fantastic. And the music on this particular stage is one of my favourite pieces. It's just, it's a simple riff, it's a simple loop, but it just works really well. And unfortunately you can't hear it because I have the game turned down so I can put the commentary on it. But just, if you've not played it, or you know, if you never intend to play it, just check the soundtrack out, 'cause some of the tunes, they're so simple, just little instrumental pieces, but they've got some nice beats, and I just thought they were really catchy and really fun to fight to. And if a game has good music, when I'm battling, it makes me want to battle more, and that is a good sign. But this is the kind of samurai slash ninja enemies that are going to occupy this level. And these guys are really difficult because they can break your combo in a variety of different ways. Like, they'll jump around onto walls and throw kunais at you, and they do a move where they dash towards you and they do a 3-hit slash like you just did then, and they do an awesome looking little ninja run, so watch out for that as well. They block a lot, they're pretty tough. They're a fun enemy to fight. Just be aware of what I'm doing now when I'm playing is I'm looking at the camera to behind me, because the camera on this game is fucking horrible, and enemies do attack you off screen. And that's one of the things that I think if they changed on the game, you know, if they pacified the enemies off screen like any competent action game usually does, it would allow, at least, for you not to get bummed so much by projectiles and silly stuff. And it'd just make it much more fun, and it'd make you able to forgive the camera for going too close. And it goes too close all the time. There are encounters on this level in particular where if the camera just pulled out a little bit more, the camera would be really good. And, you know, I'm not asking for it to do a God of War 1, where it pulls out so far you can't even see Kratos' bald head. Same with God of War 3. A God of War in general, I'm not asking for it to do that. That suits God of War because they do it well. But this game, I mean, look at the camera now. I could have done this camera. This is fine for me. I mean, it's getting a bit small now, but does it really have to be up his ass? I just don't get it. So this is the samurai enemies. Those were the ninjas. These are the samurai, the honourable ronins. And these guys are tough as well because they're fast, they're defensive, and they've got a lot of life. So I recommend killing the samurai with execution technique, but my technique is simple. I stand in front of them usually, and I let them attack, and then I try and dodge it and get the counter. Just then you saw me fail. They block so much. Just wait for him. He's very fast. There you go. And then take him on. And like, a couple of things I would have liked to see differently. You know, instead of just this mad slashing on this sequence, it would have been nice if you could tailor your character to how you wanted to play, and instead had different moves in those counter moments. Like, I would have really liked, instead of tapping, hold X. And it could have had Mondo stab the sword in them and just, you know, like a close-up angle of him pushing the sword forward with resistance, instead of the crazy slashing all the time. Because it kind of breeds this combat style that's very mashy, and the game, you know, a lot of times looks like it's super mashy, but there are moments where it's not at all, and it can be really precise, and it's just hidden, unfortunately, by bullshit. But back on tangent, this level is... Did you see that thing I just shot? It was like a cat statue or a tiny man, like a Mr. Saturn or something. I'm not too sure what the hell it is. Every time you shoot it, it engages you in a big group fight. And there are 5 of them. And they're spread all around this area. This area has a couple of ambient fights just knocking around for you to keep you interested. And then these 5 pretty tough fights. These are a couple of samurais and one of those gold things. And there's no checkpoint through the entire level. So you have to do all 5 of these arranged fights and those fights in between all on the same checkpoint. And one of the fights is with the target who drops the scroll and 2 of those giant dudes. Like, it's baffling. It's absolutely baffling. And I was thinking to myself, because at this moment in time, I don't think I have the skill where my life regenerates. I don't think I've bought it yet, because I was being really stubborn, and I didn't want it. And I think it must be designed in mind of, after every encounter, you stand there like a twat for 20 minutes waiting for your life to get filled so you can carry on, because there's no other real way of healing at all. There's no items. You smash pots that barely give you life. You kill enemies that barely drop life, even when you select life for them to drop when you execute them. Like, it's such a strange system. And then the other answer is, oh no, my life is regenerating, I do have it. But, or you use blood to get it back that way, which is a waste of blood in my eyes. So it's, I don't know. It just seems like something that could have been handled in a much better way. Like, a lot of things could have been, for instance, you have a guard break, which is essentially an attack modifier, because X is your slashes, Y is your guard break moves, and when you use them together, they don't modify the attacks, they don't change the combos, so, you know, you never really get access to a real list of diverse moves. Which is a shame, because it's 2-button combat, which is as complicated as it needs to be, while still remaining quite simple. You know, Ninja Gaiden gets it right, they know how to do it. Devil May Cry in certain instances have done it very, very well. Like, God of War does it very well in the most simplest form. Yet, this game just doesn't have that, which is a shame. But through that same logic, if you're coming into Killer is Dead with the mentality that this is going to be anywhere near the precision and the quality of those action games, then you're going to be so disappointed, because that's just not what this is about. It's just not the focus. And it so easily could be, and the game itself would be infinitely better. But then it probably wouldn't be a Suda game, because it's almost like the fans at this point have come to appreciate and acknowledge that there's going to be a lot of shit to wade through before you get to the good stuff. Like this enemy that's in the air, that I believe shooting is the only real viable way of damaging it, because your attacks always seem to miss it when you try and slash it. Like, what is the point in that? Getting an enemy to just shoot. And it's not, don't take 1 or 2 shots, it takes a balls ton. Like, come on. So strange. But over here is a secret area, which is my favourite area of the game, because I love chopping bamboo trees with samurai swords. It's something that doesn't happen enough in games, and right there, if you're wondering, I don't have enough blood to use the drill, so I have to go and engage this next fight to go into that secret little tree yard place. And what I've done to save the frustration of watching me chop all the trees individually, which I'm a fan of doing, I've done some edits to trim out the tree chopping. And I chopped a whole bunch of them the first time to get some of my blood back, and then I left the scarlet tree for later for when I needed it. So if you're wondering why I come back twice, it's just because I wanted to kind of, not so much mid-max, but just make the most of what I could get from those trees. And I just like chopping them. Anybody curious on the origins of my chopping fetish? It came from Onimusha 2. In Onimusha 2, it was one of the finest realizations in a game of feudal Japan. And unfortunately, in the entire game, I think there was 2 bamboo trees that you could chop, but they just looked so cool. Because I'm a big fan of that period, those, you know, period films in that area, period games in that area, just of the whole samurai traditions and chopping bamboo trees, I used to do it a lot. And this is something that Aiden can contest to, because I used to chop that tree a whole bunch when I was a kid, and it's just something I really like. And it's really funny, because, you know, the East, or you know, in Japan, they've tried so hard as of recently, as of, you know, the last 20 years, to get away from those stereotypical themes that they're associated with, which comes from their history. Yet I fucking adore it. And, you know, in every game I wish they were themed that way, because it's just an aesthetic, and it's just something I really, really like, personally. But that was me cutting the tree chopping down to a minimal. And just doing a little bit of cutting. Some life in that one, which is... I don't even think that gives you a full gem back, which goes to show how tight the game is with life. And to be... like, thinking back, this is the hardest difficulty, and I thought there was going to be one after it, because there's just nothing about the difficulty says hardest difficulty. You know, I didn't really notice the enemies taking much more than hard. I didn't really notice them doing much more damage than hard. I didn't realise a heightened aggression or awareness or intelligence. Like, they literally must have just raised a couple of statistic, you know, toggles, and that's it. Like, the bosses I noticed big time. Not necessarily for you know, how hard they were, but for how much they took. They take significantly more on very hard. And this boss coming up in particular, when I fought him on... Look at the camera there, man. Wow. When I fought him on hard, I had a system that worked, and it utilised the block, and it was the first time I tried to block the bosses. And it worked flawlessly. I beat him without taking any damage at all on the first phase. I think on the second phase I got caught because I'd not seen it before. But I killed him relatively easily compared to some of the bosses up to that point. You know, I didn't see what the checkpoint was like because I never died on him. And then on my recording run for very hard, my block was failing me. And he killed me a whole bunch. And I was tempted to change my strategy, but in the end, I ended up figuring out that it wasn't me that was failing, it was the game. And this is not me trying to, you know, blame my own flaws on my tools. You know, I'm not a bad craftsman, it's just fact. And there are a lot of people on YouTube that love to blame everything but themselves, but I personally believe if you don't blame yourself, you never get to the point where you improve the things that you're blaming. So you need to take a healthy dose of humility. And there's a lot of YouTube comments that could fucking do with that, because I get some really smug, pretentious assholes at times. It's baffling that these people can interact with other humans in real life without getting punched. But the reason the block was failing me, and it was the game and rather than myself, is Mondo does a couple of different slashes when you press X once. He does a faster one where you can cancel out of it really quickly, and then every so often he does one which has got a lot more recovery frames, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because it's reading an input that I'm not doing, or if it's doing a move that I'm not asking it to, or if it's just, you know, the kind of like a context-sensitive attack where his animation changes, you know, just subtly depending on positioning and direction he faces and things. I'm not too sure. But what I do know is when I came out of the boss fight and I was messing about pressing X and then immediately blocking, I noticed maybe 1 in every 3 slash, it took, you know, I could feel the time it took for Mondo to get his guard up. And what was happening in the boss fight is I was getting hit when I was guarding, and I just couldn't figure it out. I was like, what is going wrong here? I'm holding block. I should not take a hit here. I know you can block this attack. I've done it. And what was happening is the recovery frames were so major that I was getting hit in the time it took Mondo to raise his sword. And I'm going to discuss that a little bit further in the boss fight itself, and you're going to see me do the exact same strategy that worked on hard perfectly, and it works decently this time, but I need to convey to people who are playing that I had a lot of trouble with it not working. And it wasn't for lack of technique, it was just, for some reason, Mondo was slow on bringing the sword back up to guard, and I took a hit I feel I shouldn't have taken. So that's why I'm going to be quite tentative in the boss fight. You'll notice I'm not going flat out with attacks, because I'm preemptively predicting blocks, because I needed to, because the game just didn't respond quick enough for me. And there's a lot of people that are going to really agree with me on stuff like that, because the game itself at times doesn't respond fast enough, but it's something that can be accommodated for. Like, my biggest flaw with Ninja Gaiden 3 was the game is so reliant on you being faster than everything else that whenever it did drop an input, or whenever it didn't respond, or whenever there was too much recovery frames, it got you killed. Because you couldn't survive it, you had to be quicker, and there was nothing you could personally do because the character himself was limited and restricted in such a way that he couldn't move quick enough for you, so you got bummed by a bunch of grey ninjas. Which is not a fun situation to be in unless, you know, you're into that stuff. But this is the two big fellas. Chaz and Dave, as I call them. And I want to tell you to parry them, I want to tell you to just guard them, but there's a part of me that also needs to tell you the amount of times I tried it, it felt like it was spot on, and I took AoE damage from an attack that didn't hit me. So you need to be aware that sometimes you just get hit, unless your timing is immaculate, and apparently mine's not. I have my moments, but the technique is pretty simple. Hit and run, get away from the attacks, lure the attacks. If you can get them to hit each other, they'll do much more damage than you ever could in the same time period. And just try and stay alive, because if you die on this moment, you're all the way back to the beginning of the video. And I don't know if you've noticed, guys, but we've been fighting for 15 minutes. 15 minutes of lost progress is like PS1 RPGs when you forget to save. It's inexcusable. And that's coming from somebody who says this level is his favourite. I love this level, but that checkpoint, it's too much. You know, it's just too much. That right there was an execution move that should give me whatever I picked. I happened to pick the experience crystals, and at this moment in time I have a lot of them. And you might be sat there at home screaming, why aren't you upgrading? You've got all those crystals. I just didn't really feel like it. You know, I have all the moves I wanted, and to be honest, I started with most of them because I don't really think there's many moves on this game that are worth buying. You know, the upgrade skills could have been so much more unique and made such a bigger impression on the player, gave them crazy and impressive things to try out and do, and instead it's, you know, launcher, spin attack, shoot a gun a little bit faster, shoot it with more damage. You know, we've never heard of that one before. Just number crunching, pointless, boring attributes. Not interested. Another thing too that I would like to be slightly different, although I understand why it's not, is the combo meter in the top right. When you get yourself to level 5, Mondo attacks so fast with this preset animation, which is this really fancy flippy attack, which, you know, you've got no control over because he just starts getting all acrobatic and bullshitty. But you lose the ability to swing faster when you get hit or when the red bar goes down to the bottom. And the only way to keep the bar up is to land hits. And you'll notice everybody blocks. So there are times when you physically can't land any more hits unless you go around the enemy. And every so often, you can't get around the enemy because there's walls and things. So you end up losing your combo and having to build it all the way back up for a reason that's less than, you know, it's not a good reason for losing it. You know, I couldn't get my combo because the enemies horde block and I couldn't break their guard. Because the time it took me to charge my guard break, my combo was dead. So I'm just not a big fan of that. It would have been nice if it was kept the same until you got hit. And I don't know how they would have balanced that, but considering that the entire combat system is built and designed towards you spamming the button and gradually getting faster at spamming said button, it would have been nice to have more control, more skilled control over it, rather than just, you know, an arbitrary time limit. This might be me just getting a little bit too deep in the mechanics. If you're coming here to play an action game and you want to smash some dudes with a sword and it look really fancy and have an incoherent story, you're in the best place for that. You'll get exactly what you ask for. Like, if you can play Dynasty Warriors and it doesn't bore the tits off you, this is probably going to feel nuanced and, you know, complicated and stylish and awesome, and you'll have a whale of a time. But if you've just come from a highly competent, highly technical and proficient action game, then this is going to feel like a cheap motel that makes you feel dirty once you slept in its cum-covered sheets. And that's not to say that the cum was there, it's just to say that they only washed out half its influence. And if they got one of those crazy CSI lights, it'd end up just being a bukkake fest, which nobody wants to sleep on. And fingers crossed the people too young to hear that sentence didn't understand it. But that's the end of the level, folks. All that's left to be done now is to run back towards this entrance over here, and I will meet you on the boss fight coming up on the next video. So thanks for watching, and you take care now.
It's well past our meeting time. That's your target, Hamadayama. He's technically not a wireless.
Then what is he?
He was originally human, but was transformed into one when the dark matter from the moon corrupted his soul.
Dark matter.
So he's not too different from the vampire you defeated a little while ago.
Then, to save his soul, I have to behead him?
Hesitate for 1 second, and you'll be the dead one.
Hey, about Brian.
You've noticed too.
If this is the boss's show, then I can hardly be the star.